He gave shelter to an Apache woman. By morning, war paint riders surrounded his cabin. The wagon's tongue dug a deep scar in the sand where it had nosed into the wash and stopped. One wheel lay flat, snapped off the axle like a tooth knocked out of a jaw. The other still creaked slow in the wind. Crouched beside the tilted bed, an Apache woman braced both hands on the ground like she was holding the land still under her. Her braid whipped across her back, her dress torn at one sleeve. The one remaining mule stood with its head low and its sides heaving. The other lay on its side, shuddering, when Cole Harper reined in on the ridge and took it all in. At one glance the sun was still high and hard, the wind already full of dust. There was no shelter for a mile in any direction, and if there were rifles on any ridge they could punch straight through him before he had time to think. His body still swung out of the saddle. Before his mind caught up, he slid down the slope with his bay's reins in his fist, boots kicking small rockfalls ahead of him. As he came closer, he saw that the woman's bare foot bent at a wrong angle when she tried to rise, swollen thick at the ankle, her knuckles white on a narrow bundle wrapped in deerskin. Faint lines of red and black paint crossed her cheekbones, half washed by sweat and road dust. Her eyes snapped to him, sharp and weighing. He stopped just out of reach, breath steady. "I got water and a roof 3 miles that way," he said, wind catching the words and shredding them. "You ride there or you sit here and let this sun finish what it started." Her jaw worked once. She glanced at the sky, at the dying mule, at his horse. Then she nodded once. "My name Tala," she said. English bent but clear. "My Uncle Chief, my footfool, storm brake wheel, trader's leave." She jerked her chin at the empty driver's plank. "You help. You in story now." They worked fast because the sky was already changing color toward that ugly pale that meant worse wind coming. Cole cut the good mule loose, left the other where it lay, hauled the sack of flour and the coffee pot and the bundle of painted sticks from the wagon. He let Tala keep her deerskin packet tight to her chest. He boosted her up behind his saddle when her bad ankle folded on the first try, felt her fingers dig into his coat when the horse stepped, tied the trembling mule to his bay's tail, and turned west. Every yard of open ground felt twice as wide as usual with a stranger at his back, and a broken wagon pointing behind them like a finger. For all he knew, eyes watched from stone and scrub, waiting to see what the white rancher would do with the woman who carried a chief's messages. The ride back to his cabin took longer than the distance, because the wind came at them sideways, gusts shoving horse and riders, grit stinging their faces. Twice the mule balked and he had to circle back, talking low and steady. Tala muttered in Apache under her breath, words he did not know but recognized as the rhythm of someone pushing pain down deep. By the time the low rise that hid his place finally showed itself, the light had gone flat and mean. His cabin sat in the shallow fold like a dark knot, a short rail fence around the corral, 2 half-starved cottonwoods by the well, nothing there worth a war, and yet men had bled for less. He helped Tala down. Her ankle shook. He caught more of her weight than she meant to give him. She hissed once, and then locked her jaw. His cattle showed small on the far slope, heads up, uneasy. The kind of silence that made his neck itch pressed over the yard. Inside. The cabin barely had room for one man's habits. A narrow bed, a table under the single window, the iron stove in the corner, shelves with 3 plates and a dented tin cup. As the lamp flame climbed the wick, Tala's eyes moved over all of it, mapping exits, measuring him. When he knelt and wrapped her ankle with strips of old shirt, she watched his hands like they were knives. "You help with no question," she said finally, voice gone rough with fatigue. "You not ask who I fight, who I take from." He shrugged, tying off the bandage. "You got bones like mine," he answered. "The land doesn't care who falls on it. I ain't smart enough to leave someone to rattle out their last breath in a wash." She huffed once, a small sound that might have meant agreement. "My people say smart man walk away from strangers' trouble," she murmured. "You may be not smart, maybe something else. He set beans and coffee on, the small routines of evening wrapping themselves around the strangeness of her in his chair. They ate with their elbows nearly touching because the table was small and they were both too tired to pretend it wasn't. Between spoonfuls he pulled what story he could from her. Tala told him about the broken wagon, about traders hurrying ahead when storm clouds stacked black over the flats, about waking on the tilted bed with her ankle on fire and wheel splintered, about watching wagon ruts blur as wind ate them while she tried to sling the messages and the small bundle of medicine her uncle had trusted to her across her shoulder and limp after shadows. She spoke of whispers that would already be riding the ridge, trader dead, Apache near, paint on faces, men in town quick to believe the last part, very slow to check the first. Outside, the usual night sounds were wrong. No insect chorus, no far-off coyote, just wind and a feeling like breath held. He checked the shutter twice, dropping the bar across it each time. When he finally lay on his blanket by the door with the revolver close, sleep came thin and full of hoofbeats. It was the bucket that saved him from stepping out barefoot into the ring at dawn. He woke at first grey light, joints complaining, reached for the handle by habit and opened the door still half inside a dream of dust. The cold hit his face. The yard lay washed in a flat silver, and 10 steps from the threshold a spear stood driven deep into the hard-packed earth, feathers and strips of red cloth hanging from its head, stirring in the light wind. His breath backed up in his chest for one long moment. Then he followed the spear's line past the fence, past the well to the low ridges around his place. Horses on every rise, small tough ponies with painted flanks, riders sitting them like part of the rock, faces marked in white and black and red, rifles laid easy across laps. He counted in fragments 20, 30, more shadows beyond, women and children further upslope, watching, no one charging, no one whooping, just war paint riders encircling his cabin in a quiet noose. Behind him the floor creaked. Tala came to the doorway, one hand catching the frame. Her braid hung loose. Her eyes had shadows under them, but they went sharp at the sight. "My uncle," she said simply, nodding to the broad-shouldered man at the front of the nearest line. He sat his horse like the saddle had formed around him, hair threaded with grey, bone necklace over his shirt, rifle laid across his thighs. When he spoke, his voice carried without shouting. Tala answered in their language, her hand on the spear shaft. The exchange went back and forth, short, heavy. Then she turned her head just enough that Cole could see her face. "He asked, 'Why you keep me?' she said. 'Why white man open door instead of tying me and calling town riders? He think maybe you want trade, maybe you want blood price.'" Cole's lip curled, not at her, but at the idea. "You tell him I don't deal in people," he said. "I brought you in because the wheel snapped and the sun doesn't take questions, not because I thought you were a coin." Tala relayed that, adding more than his few words. He could hear it in the length. Her uncle's eyes tightened, not in anger, more in interest. The chief lifted his rifle and rapped the butt once against the top fence rail. A signal. The riders on the ridges eased forward a few paces in unison, tightening the ring. The air itself seemed to press on Cole's chest. Tala's voice dropped. "This circle say my people see every move," she murmured. "If men from town come with guns, they see that too." Her warning arrived at the same time as the sound of hooves from the scrub, clatter loud and sloppy compared to the Apache ponies. 12 riders pushed into view from the east, hats low, coats flapping, the faded blue coat of town militia in their middle. Mason halted at their front, his shoulders square with anger he had been saving for just such a morning. He hauled his horse to a stop well short of the fence, eyes jumping from war paint to spear, to Taylor to Cole. "You lost your damn mind, Harper," he called. "You drag hostiles to our back door, now look what you've done." Cole walked out to stand between the spear and the corral gate. Empty hands lifted a little, not in surrender but to show he held nothing. He felt every gaze hook into him from both sides. All these men looking for a place to hang their fear. "She was already here when I came on her," he called back. "Wagon busted, foot near ruined, traders gone. The only thing I dragged anywhere was her sorry mule. Mason spat dust that trader's boy limped in last night half dead," he shouted. Said Apache cut his pa down, took his chest, left arrows and mules in the wash. He pointed at Taylor like a man finally finding the nail his hammer had been hunting. "Maybe that one there knows where the hardware ended up." Tyler lifted her chin, her voice cool. "Boy wake in dark with white men's breath on his neck and blame paint he has easiest word for," she said for Cole's benefit. Not loud but not hiding. "My uncle send me with warning sticks to stop war. Storm and thieves faster." She looked at Cole. "If your men kill first on a scare, my people will not run." Mason edged his horse closer, the men behind him spreading out half-circle mirroring the Apache line. "This is simple, Rourke," he said. "You hand her over. You step aside. We send a message that this valley don't take to raids. You hold on to her, and all these painted cousins of hers see as a white man shielding what they took." Cole felt a strange calm settle in, like the moment before a storm finally breaks. "There it is," he said, loud enough for both sides. "Everyone wants something easy. You want someone to hang so you don't have to think about who really stripped that wagon." He jerked his chin at Taylor's uncle. "He wants to know whether I pulled his niece in because I got a decent streak or because I smelled a bargain. You all pressing on my fence like it's the only line between sense and stupidity." He took one more step forward, boots scuffing the dirt. "If we stand here yelling," he said, "sooner or later some nervous hand pulls a trigger, and then we're all done thinking, so here's my offer." He pointed toward the low cut leading back to the wagon road. "We ride out together, a few from each side. We read the ground where that wreck lies. We follow whatever tracks there are, if it's Apache sign all the way. I won't stop you when you call this war. If it's not, you swallow that word and keep it behind your teeth." Mason shifted, annoyed at having the choice laid bare. The militiaman beside him, eyes on the ring of riders, spoke first. "Better know who we're shooting at before we start," he muttered. "I served in places where men didn't bother, and it didn't end pretty." Mason swore under his breath, but grudged. "Two of mine," he said no more. "You lead and you come back, or we count you missing with them." Tala spoke fast to her uncle. The chief listened, lines on his face deep as old canyons. Then he sent two younger warriors down toward the fence with a small motion of his hand, their faces striped in fresh paint. Ponies stepping light. He said, "You walk between fires now," Tala translated quietly. "You show what truth your eyes see. If you lie, he know. If they lie, you see." She reached for Cole's stirrup as he cinched the saddle, fingers tight for a heartbeat. "You speak what earth say," she murmured. "Not what either side want." He met her gaze, then swung up, heart heavy but clear. Living on this land had taught him that sometimes all a man owned was the words he chose when everyone else wanted to shout him into a corner. The wreck lay where he and Tala had left it. Wagon canted, one wheel half buried, dead mule stiffening. No swarm of arrows in the boards, no charred circle of burned camp around it. The tracks told a quieter, uglier story. Wagon tips, men panic. Then someone else comes later, following the rut marks. Drag lines cut into the sand where a chest heavy with goods had been hauled away. Boot prints around it. Sharp heels, long stride, not moccasin tread. The Apache warriors crouched by the marks, nodding once. "White men," one said in slow English. "2, 3, carry heavy box away from town, not toward." The settler from Mason's line swallowed, color creeping up his neck. They followed the drag south until the ground hardened and smoke rose in a thin smear, then left the horses and moved in on foot. From the lip of a shallow basin they saw 3 men by a small fire. Harris's body under a blanket, his boots showing. His trader's chest cracked open, cloth and tin spilling. One man picked over the pile. Another roasted meat on a spit that made Cole's stomach knot when he realized it was mule flesh. The third sat with a rifle laid across his knees, lazy but close enough. A smaller shape lay tied near the wagon tongue. The trader's boy, lips cracked, eyes glassy. When he turned his head, Cole saw paint smudged on the rock behind him, a clumsy hand's attempt at Apache sign using the dye sticks from Tala's bundle. Anger flared in him so sharp it shivered his hands. Not because men killed for goods, he had seen that too often, but because they had taken the time to twist the story on the stone before riding away. The plan was simple because there was no time for clever. He walked down with his hands up, called the bandana-faced man by name. "You picked a fine mess to land us all in," he said. The man laughed, said the land would be better with fewer camps of painted thieves on it anyway, never mind that he stood over a white trader's body. While his attention skewed sideways, the Apache warriors came over the rim with a shout that punched the air. They slid down the slope, spears low, not to kill, but to smash rifles out of hands. The thieves grabbed for guns and found stone or wood instead. Cole lunged for the one nearest the boy, boot catching his weapon, shoulder taking him down. For a moment, the basin became a blur of dust and noise. Then it cleared. 3 thieves bound with their own rope. The boy's hands free and shaking, the Apache standing over the trader's body with a grief in their eyes that made words feel cheap on the long ride back, with Harris lashed face down over one saddle and the thieves groaning on theirs. The trader's boy clung to a warrior's belt and stared at Cole, like the whole valley relied on what came out of his mouth next, by the time they topped the last rise and the cabin came into view again. The ring of riders was still there, the town men still skulking at the edge. Every breath in the place seemed to hitch when they saw the prisoners and the blanket. Cole rode straight into the narrow yard again, throat dry, and told it as plain as he could. Harris died to greed, he said, not Apache arrows. These 3 men followed his wagon, waited for storm and fear, then cut him down and took what they wanted. They painted rocks and stories, both to make you look at the wrong camp. The trader's boy slid from his horse, stumbled to Taylor's uncle's mount, and poured out his own halting confession. How he had believed the lies in the dark, because fear made the faces in his head wear the only paint he knew. The chief listened, expression carved from stone, then spoke, his words rolling through Tala. He say, "Fear almost bought a war today," she translated. "Your boy's story almost turned this valley to smoke." He say, "Men who twist blood into excuses will answer to both fires." He nodded once to the militia captain, once to the Apache riders. "Both sides will see judgment, no shadows, no night blades." Mason's mouth twisted, but he could not argue with the tracks under his own horse. The boy's raw wrists, the thieves' faces, when the chief rode to the spear and pulled it up, then handed it across the fence to Cole. The watching lines shifted. Something important turned quietly. "My niece walked into your house and you did not sell her fear," Tala relayed. "My riders see your door now. If hate come from hills wearing our paint, you stand with us to stop it. If hate come from town with your faces, we expect you to stand between, not run. There is no more middle place for you." Cole felt the truth of that land heavy in his hands as he planted the spear back in the yard. By the time the sun slid behind the western ridge, the war party had thinned to a few watchers on the hills. The town riders had gone back in a loose, uneasy line, dragging their own shame behind them. Inside the cabin, the fire in the stove burned low and steady, throwing a soft light over Tala's face as she sat at his table. Her ankle bound, her bundle open to show the painted sticks and folded hides she would still carry when she rode out again. She added new marks to one of them with charcoal, a circle for the cabin, crossed lines for the 2 directions trouble had come from. She said, "This story must live longer than storm, and this day my people will say your name around their fires like warning and thanks both." Cole ladled stew into 2 bowls, feeling the day's weight in his bones, but something else under it. Lighter, the sense that his place was no longer just one man's stubborn scrap of dirt. It sat where two worlds touched and had not burned. Later, when the wind quieted, and only the faint creak of the well and the soft breath of cattle came through the walls, Tala stood in the doorway looking at the spear, feathers catching a bit of starlight. "You know town men will call you traitor for this," she said, voice soft but cutting true. "Say you choose us over them." He came to stand beside her, arms folded loosely. "I chose not to let cowards use your people as cover for their own stealing," he said. "If that makes me something they don't have a word for yet, let them grind their teeth on it." He thought of how easy it would have been to ride past that broken wagon, to wave off responsibility with the same lazy shrug those thieves had used when they painted rocks. He knew he would see Harris's blanket and the boy's wrists and Tala's steady eyes every time he closed his own. Out here a man's name ran ahead of him on the wind. If it carried coward, he would rather not hear it, on a frontier where fences blew down. Rumors rode faster than mail, and graves were sometimes the only markers men left. Cole Harper had given shelter to an Apache woman when every safe voice would have told him to keep riding. By morning, war paint riders rimmed his cabin, and settlers muttered about hanging him for treachery. Yet he rode between them, followed the real blood trail, and dragged the truth back into the light where both fires had to see it. In return, he gained something no deed paper could give, a spear that meant protection as much as danger, and a thin, stubborn bridge between people who had only seen each other through the sights of rifles. If this tale of hard choices and forged trust under a western sky sits with you, tie your horse to our rail, subscribe, and ride with us into the next story where another man or woman has to choose between easy fear and costly honor.